The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Queen Camilla walked through her private garden. She had no idea that this peaceful Tuesday would become the most terrifying day of her life. The roses were blooming beautifully, and she stopped to smell their sweet fragrance. Everything seemed perfect in her world. Captain James Mitchell stood at attention in the main security office, studying the duty roster for the day. He had been head of the Royal Guard for 15 years, and had never faced anything like what was about to unfold. His phone buzzed with an urgent message that would change everything. Code red. Princess Charlotte is missing from her chambers. Last seen at 11 p.m. yesterday. Immediate search required. James felt his blood turn cold. Princess Charlotte. The Queen's beloved niece, who had been staying at the palace for the summer, was nowhere to be found. She was only 16 years old and had never disappeared before. Something was terribly wrong. The message came from Detective Sarah Barnes, who had been called in from Scotland Yard. She was already on her way to the palace with a team of investigators. James knew they had to act fast, but they also had to be careful. The royal family's privacy was sacred, and searching the Queen's private chambers would be an extraordinary step. Queen Camilla was still in her garden when James approached her. His face was pale and serious, which immediately alarmed her. She could see something was very wrong by the way he walked toward her with quick, urgent steps. "Your Majesty, I need to speak with you privately," James said, bowing slightly. His voice was steady, but she could hear the worry underneath. "What is it, James?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," Camilla replied, setting down her gardening shears. She had known James for many years and trusted him completely. "It's about Princess Charlotte, Your Majesty. She's missing from her chambers. We believe she disappeared sometime during the night." The Queen's face went white. Charlotte was like a daughter to her, especially since the young princess had lost her own mother in a car accident 3 years ago. She had been staying at the palace while her father, the Queen's brother, Prince Edward, was traveling on diplomatic business. "Missing? What do you mean, missing? Have you checked everywhere?" Camilla's voice was rising with panic. "We've searched the common areas, the kitchens, the library, even the stables, but we haven't checked your private chambers yet. We need your permission to conduct a thorough search there." The Queen's private chambers were off-limits to everyone except her personal staff. These rooms included her bedroom, sitting room, private study, and a small apartment where special guests sometimes stayed. Charlotte had been given a room in this section because it was the safest and most secure part of the palace. "Of course, search everywhere. Turn the place upside down if you have to. We must find her," Camilla said, her maternal instincts taking over completely. Detective Barnes arrived at the palace 30 minutes later with her team. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes who had solved many difficult cases in London. She had been specially trained to handle sensitive matters involving important families. "Your Majesty, I'm Detective Barnes. I need to ask you some questions about Princess Charlotte's routine and state of mind," she said respectfully. They sat in the Queen's private sitting room while James organized the search teams outside. The room was elegant but comfortable, with family photos on every table. Many of the pictures showed Charlotte at various family events, always smiling and happy. "Charlotte has been staying here for 6 weeks," Camilla explained. "She seemed perfectly fine yesterday. We had dinner together, talked about her upcoming school year, and she went to her room around 10 o'clock to read." "Did she seem worried about anything? Any problems at school or with friends?" Detective Barnes asked, taking notes carefully. "Nothing unusual. She was excited about starting her final year at boarding school. She's always been a responsible girl, never caused any trouble." "What about security in your private chambers? Who has access?" "Only myself, my personal maid Margaret, and James. Charlotte's room has a key card system that tracks entry and exit." Detective Barnes made a note to check the key card records immediately. This would show exactly when Charlotte's door was last opened and by whom. Meanwhile, James was briefing his search teams in the courtyard. 12 royal guards stood at attention, ready to conduct the most important search of their careers. "We're looking for any sign of Princess Charlotte or any clue about where she might have gone," James announced. "Check every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Look for personal items, notes, anything that might tell us what happened." The guards split into 3 teams. The first team would search the Queen's bedroom and sitting room. The second would focus on Charlotte's room and the guest areas. The third would examine the private study and any storage areas. Team 1 entered the Queen's bedroom with great care. They looked under the bed, in the wardrobes, behind curtains, and even checked the bathroom thoroughly. Everything appeared normal. The bed was neatly made, and nothing seemed disturbed. Team 2 concentrated on Charlotte's room, which was decorated in soft pink and white colors. Her clothes were still hanging in the wardrobe, and her suitcases were unpacked in the corner. Her phone was charging on the bedside table, which struck everyone as very strange. What teenager goes anywhere without their phone? The team leader, Sergeant Williams, picked up the phone carefully with gloved hands. The last text message was sent at 10:30 p.m. to her best friend, Emma. "Going to bed early tonight. Talk tomorrow." But on her desk, they found something much more interesting. There was a handwritten note that simply said, "If something happens to me, check the old passage behind the bookshelf in Aunt Camilla's study." Sergeant Williams felt his heart racing. What old passage? What did Charlotte know that she hadn't told anyone? Team 3 was already searching the Queen's study when they received the radio call about the note. The study was filled with books, official papers, and family documents. Behind the main desk was a large bookshelf that stretched from floor to ceiling. "Look for any books or sections that might move or open," James instructed over the radio. He was now coordinating the search from the main hallway. Guard Thomas Reynolds was examining the bookshelf when he noticed something odd. One section of books seemed newer than the others, and when he pressed on them, they felt loose. He pushed harder, and suddenly a small section of the wall swung inward. "Sir, I found something," Thomas called out excitedly. Behind the bookshelf was a narrow passage that led into darkness. It was just wide enough for one person to walk through, and it appeared to be very old, probably built centuries ago when the palace was first constructed. James rushed to the study, followed by Detective Barnes and several other guards. They shined flashlights into the passage and could see it extended quite far into the wall. "Your Majesty, did you know about this passage?" Detective Barnes asked Camilla, who had followed them to the study. "I had no idea it existed," Camilla replied, looking genuinely shocked. "This palace is hundreds of years old. There could be many passages and rooms we don't know about." "We need to explore this immediately," James said. "Charlotte might be trapped in there, or this might be how she left the palace without being detected." Detective Barnes organized a careful exploration team. They would go slowly and document everything they found. The passage might contain important evidence about Charlotte's disappearance. As they prepared to enter the hidden passage, everyone felt a mixture of hope and fear. They might find Charlotte safe and sound, or they might discover something much worse. The mystery was deepening with every discovery. The passage was narrow and dusty, with stone walls that felt damp to the touch. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air smelled old and stale. It was clear that no one had used this passage for many years. About 20 feet into the passage, they found Charlotte's silk scarf caught on a rough stone. It was definitely hers. Camilla recognized it immediately as the one Charlotte had been wearing at dinner the night before. "She was here," Detective Barnes said grimly. "But where did she go from here?" The passage continued ahead, disappearing into darkness. They could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance, and the air was getting colder as they went deeper. As they moved forward carefully, James noticed that the dust on the floor had been disturbed recently. There were footprints, small ones that could belong to Charlotte, but also larger ones that definitely belonged to someone else. She wasn't alone, he whispered to Detective Barnes. Someone was with her, or someone took her. The realization hit everyone at the same time. This wasn't just a case of a teenage girl wandering off or running away. Someone had used this secret passage to take Princess Charlotte from the safety of the palace. The investigation had suddenly become much more serious and dangerous. They weren't just looking for a missing teenager anymore. They were hunting for kidnappers who knew the palace's secret passages and had managed to outsmart all the security systems. As they continued through the passage, each step brought them closer to answers, but also deeper into a mystery that threatened to shake the royal family to its core. The question now wasn't just where Charlotte was, but who had taken her and why. The passage ahead curved to the right, and they could see a faint light coming from somewhere up ahead. Whatever they were about to discover would change everything they thought they knew about the palace's security and the people they trusted. Behind them, the Queen waited anxiously in her study, praying that her beloved niece would be found safe and sound. But deep in her heart, she feared that Charlotte's disappearance was just the beginning of something much more sinister. The royal guards pressed forward into the unknown, knowing that time was running out and that every minute could be the difference between life and death for Princess Charlotte. The passage opened into a small underground chamber that none of them had expected to find. The room was about 12 feet square, with stone walls and a vaulted ceiling. Ancient torches hung on the walls, though they hadn't been lit for decades. Detective Barnes swept her flashlight around the room and gasped at what she saw. There were clear signs that someone had been using this space recently. Fresh candles sat on a wooden table, and there were modern camping chairs arranged in a circle. "This has been used as a meeting place," she said, examining the items carefully. "Look at this." On the table were several documents spread out like someone had been studying them. James moved closer and recognized them immediately. They were floor plans of the palace, detailed security schedules, and guard rotation charts. "These are classified documents," James said angrily. "Only senior staff have access to these. Someone on the inside has been planning this for weeks, maybe months." Sergeant Williams found something even more disturbing in the corner of the room. There was a small camp bed with Charlotte's sweater folded neatly on top of it. Next to the bed was a tray with leftover food and a water bottle. "She was kept here," Detective Barnes concluded grimly. "But not for long. The food is still fresh. This was probably her holding place before they moved her somewhere else." The discovery sent chills through everyone present. Charlotte hadn't just wandered off or gotten lost. She had been kidnapped by people who knew the palace intimately and had been planning this operation for a long time. James immediately radioed the main security office. "Lock down the entire palace. No one enters or leaves without my personal approval. We have a security breach at the highest level." Detective Barnes was photographing everything in the chamber when she noticed another passage leading out of the far side of the room. This one was different. It had been recently cleaned and showed clear signs of regular use. "They have an escape route," she announced. "This passage probably leads outside the palace grounds." The investigation team prepared to follow the second passage, but James insisted on calling for backup first. If they were dealing with professional kidnappers who had inside knowledge of the palace, they needed to be prepared for anything. While they waited for additional security personnel, Detective Barnes questioned Queen Camilla more thoroughly about palace staff and anyone who might have access to the classified documents they had found. "Your Majesty, I need you to think carefully about anyone who has been in your private chambers recently. Staff members, visitors, maintenance workers, anyone who could have discovered that passage." Camilla sat in her chair looking pale and worried. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and she felt responsible for Charlotte's safety. "Margaret, my personal maid, has been with me for 20 years. I trust her completely," she began. "Then there's James and his security team. The cleaning staff comes through twice a week, but they're always supervised." "What about recent visitors? Anyone new who might have been in your study?" 3 weeks ago, we had a historian come to examine some of the palace's old architectural drawings. He spent several hours in my study, looking at documents about the palace's construction. Detective Barnes felt her pulse quicken. Do you remember his name? Dr. Marcus Webb. He came highly recommended from the National Trust. He was researching hidden passages and secret rooms in historical buildings. The pieces were starting to fit together. Dr. Webb would have been looking specifically for passages like the one they had just discovered. He would have had legitimate access to the study and plenty of time to find the hidden entrance. James was already on his radio, calling for a full background check on Dr. Marcus Webb. Within minutes, they had disturbing news. "Sir, Dr. Webb isn't who he claimed to be," came the report from the main security office. "The real Dr. Webb is currently in Australia on a research trip. Someone used his identity to gain access to the palace." The fake historian had spent hours in the Queen's study, probably mapping out the secret passages and planning every detail of Charlotte's kidnapping. He had fooled everyone with false credentials and a convincing story. "We need to find out everything about this imposter," Detective Barnes said. "Security cameras, background checks, anything that might tell us who he really is." Meanwhile, the backup security team had arrived and was ready to explore the second passage. This tunnel was wider and better maintained than the first one, suggesting it was still being used regularly. The passage sloped downward and seemed to head toward the edge of the palace grounds. After walking for about 10 minutes, they could hear traffic sounds from above, indicating they were approaching a public road. The tunnel ended at a concealed exit hidden behind a cluster of bushes, about half a mile from the main palace. The exit was well camouflaged and would be invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "This is how they got her out," James said grimly. "They could have had a vehicle waiting here, and no one would have seen anything." Detective Barnes examined the ground around the exit and found tire tracks in the soft earth. The tracks were fresh and belonged to a large vehicle, possibly a van or truck. "We need to get these tire impressions to our forensics team immediately," she said, "and we need to check traffic cameras on all the roads leading away from this area." Back at the palace, the investigation was expanding rapidly. More detectives arrived to question staff members and examine security footage. The fake Dr. Webb had been very careful, but no one could disappear completely without leaving some traces. The security team found that Dr. Webb had visited the palace on 3 separate occasions, not just once as the Queen had remembered. Each time, he had requested access to different areas of the building, claiming he needed to examine various architectural features. He was mapping the entire palace, James realized. He knew exactly how our security worked, where the guards were stationed, and how to avoid the cameras. The most disturbing discovery came when they reviewed the security footage from Charlotte's corridor. On the night she disappeared, the cameras had been mysteriously turned off for exactly 45 minutes between 11:15 p.m. and midnight. This was an inside job, Detective Barnes concluded. Someone with access to our security systems helped him. The investigation now focused on identifying palace staff members who had both access to the security systems and knowledge of the building's layout. It was a short list, but it included people who had worked at the palace for many years. James felt sick thinking that someone he trusted might be involved in Charlotte's kidnapping. He had worked with these people daily and considered many of them friends. The breakthrough came when they traced the fake Dr. Webb's visits more carefully. Each time he had come to the palace, he had been escorted by the same staff member, Thomas Hartwell, the deputy head of palace maintenance. Thomas had worked at the palace for 12 years and had access to security systems for maintenance purposes. He knew every corridor, every passage, and every blind spot in the building's defenses. "Bring Thomas in for questioning immediately," Detective Barnes ordered. But when security went to find him, they discovered he hadn't reported for work that morning and wasn't answering his phone. A search of Thomas's apartment revealed it had been cleaned out hastily, Most of his personal belongings were gone, and neighbors reported seeing him load boxes into a van the previous evening. "He's run," James said bitterly. "He knew we'd figure it out eventually." But Thomas had made one crucial mistake. In his hurry to escape, he had left behind a laptop computer hidden under his bed. The computer contained email communications with someone using the name M. Webb and detailed plans for Charlotte's kidnapping. The emails revealed that this wasn't just about ransom money. The kidnappers were part of a larger group with political motivations. They wanted to use Charlotte as leverage to influence government decisions about international trade agreements. "They're not planning to release her anytime soon," Detective Barnes said after reading through the communications. "This is much bigger than we thought." The emails also contained references to a safe house where Charlotte was being held. The location wasn't specified directly, but there were clues that suggested it was somewhere in the countryside, at least 2 hours' drive from London. One email mentioned the old farm near the village where we practiced, which gave investigators their first real lead about Charlotte's current location. Detective Barnes immediately coordinated with police forces across the country to identify abandoned farms near small villages within a 3-hour radius of London. There were dozens of possibilities, but they had to start somewhere. The investigation was now a race against time. The kidnappers had at least a 12-hour head start, and every hour that passed made it less likely that Charlotte would be found safe. Queen Camilla was being kept informed of every development, but the news was getting worse instead of better. What had started as a missing person case had become a complex kidnapping with international implications. "We will find her," Detective Barnes promised the Queen. "These people made mistakes, and were following every lead." But privately, she was worried. The kidnappers had planned this operation for months and had shown they were willing to use violence if necessary. Charlotte was in serious danger, and time was running out. As night fell on the palace, search teams were being deployed across the countryside. Helicopter units were being prepared, and every available detective was being called in to help with the investigation. The secret passages of the palace had revealed their secrets, but they had also shown how vulnerable even the most secure buildings could be when someone on the inside was willing to betray their trust. Charlotte was somewhere out there in the darkness, probably scared and alone, while her captors planned their next move. The only hope was that the investigators could follow the trail of clues before it was too late. The royal guards who had started their search in Queen Camilla's chambers had uncovered a conspiracy that reached far beyond the palace walls, and now they faced the greatest challenge of their careers: bringing Princess Charlotte home safely. The search teams worked through the night, following every possible lead while Charlotte remained missing. Detective Barnes had established a command center in the palace's main conference room, where dozens of police officers and investigators coordinated their efforts. At 3:30 a.m., they received their first major breakthrough. A traffic camera on the M40 motorway had captured footage of a dark van matching the tire tracks found at the secret passage exit. The van was heading west toward Oxford, and the timestamp showed it had passed the camera at 1:15 a.m. on the night Charlotte disappeared. "That's our vehicle," Detective Barnes announced to the team. They were moving fast, probably trying to get as far away as possible before we discovered she was missing. The van's license plate was partially visible in the footage, and within an hour they had traced it to a rental company in London. The van had been rented 3 days earlier using fake identification, but the rental office had security cameras that clearly showed Thomas Hartwell picking up the vehicle. "Now we know for certain that Thomas is involved," James said grimly. "But where would he take her?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Thomas's ex-girlfriend, Linda Morrison, called police after seeing his picture on the morning news. She told investigators about an old farm that Thomas had inherited from his uncle 2 years earlier. "He used to go there on weekends to fix it up," Linda explained. "It's about 2 hours from London near a village called Little Wickham. He always said it would be the perfect place to hide if he ever got in trouble." Detective Barnes immediately dispatched 3 teams to Little Wickham, while she and James headed there themselves by helicopter. The farm was isolated, surrounded by fields and woodland, with no neighbors for miles around. As dawn broke over the countryside, the helicopter approached the farm from the east, staying low to avoid detection. Through binoculars, they could see the dark van parked behind the main farmhouse. "That's definitely our target," the pilot reported. "I can see movement in the house." The ground teams were already in position around the farm's perimeter. Armed police had surrounded the property, but they needed to be extremely careful. If the kidnappers realized they were trapped, Charlotte's life would be in immediate danger. Detective Barnes coordinated the operation from a command vehicle parked a half-mile away. They had managed to tap into the farm's phone lines and were listening to conversations inside the house. "There are at least 3 people inside," the communications specialist reported. "1 female voice that could be Charlotte, and 2 male voices. One of them is definitely Thomas Hartwell." The intercepted conversations revealed that the kidnappers were becoming nervous. They had seen news reports about the palace search and knew the police were getting close to finding them. "We need to move her again," they heard Thomas saying. "This place isn't safe anymore." Detective Barnes knew they had to act quickly. If the kidnappers tried to move Charlotte again, they might lose her completely. She gave the order for the tactical team to prepare for immediate action. The plan was to approach the house from 3 directions simultaneously. One team would go through the front door, another would enter through the back, and the third would secure the barn where they believed Charlotte was being held. At exactly 7 a.m., the operation began. The tactical teams moved swiftly and silently across the fields, using the early morning mist as cover. They had practiced this type of rescue operation many times, but never with such high stakes. The front team reached the farmhouse door and could hear voices inside. Through a window, they could see Thomas Hartwell and another man studying maps spread across a kitchen table. They were clearly planning their escape route. The back team was in position at the rear entrance, waiting for the signal to move. The barn team had already reached their target and could hear someone moving around inside. "Go! Go! Go!" Detective Barnes commanded over the radio. All 3 teams moved simultaneously. The front door was breached with a battering ram, and armed officers flooded into the house shouting, "Police! Nobody move!" Thomas Hartwell tried to run, but was tackled in the kitchen before he could reach the back door. His accomplice, who turned out to be the fake Dr. Marcus Webb, surrendered immediately when he saw the armed officers. At the barn, the team found Princess Charlotte tied to a chair but alive and unharmed. She was frightened and confused, but physically okay. She had been blindfolded for most of her captivity and didn't know where she was or how long she had been there. "Charlotte, it's okay. You're safe now," the team leader said gently as he cut her bonds. "We're going to take you home." The relief in her voice was overwhelming as she realized her ordeal was finally over. "I want to see Aunt Camilla," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The helicopter was immediately dispatched to bring Charlotte back to the palace. Detective Barnes accompanied her on the flight, making sure she received medical attention and emotional support during the journey. Back at the farm, the investigation team was gathering evidence and questioning the captured kidnappers. Thomas Hartwell initially refused to cooperate, but when confronted with all the evidence against him, he finally began to talk. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said miserably. "Marcus convinced me it would be easy money. We were just supposed to take her for a day or 2 and then let her go." The fake Dr. Marcus Webb told a different story. He revealed that he was actually Marcus Dunn, a professional criminal who specialized in kidnapping wealthy individuals. He had recruited Thomas specifically because of his access to the palace. "I needed someone on the inside," Marcus explained. Thomas was perfect because he knew the building so well and had gambling debts that made him desperate for money. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been planning palace infiltrations for over a year. Thomas's gambling problems had made him vulnerable to recruitment, and Marcus had slowly drawn him into the conspiracy by offering to pay off his debts. The political motivation they had discovered in the emails turned out to be a cover story. Marcus had made up the international conspiracy angle to convince Thomas that they were part of something bigger and more important than a simple kidnapping for ransom. By noon, Charlotte was back at the palace and reunited with Queen Camilla. The emotional reunion took place in the Queen's private sitting room, with only close family members present. "I was so frightened," Charlotte said, hugging her aunt tightly. "I thought I might never see you again." "You're safe now," Camilla replied, holding her close. "That's all that matters. We're never going to let anything like this happen again." The media was already reporting that Princess Charlotte had been found safe, but the palace refused to give any details about the kidnapping or rescue operation. The family wanted to protect Charlotte's privacy and give her time to recover from her traumatic experience. Detective Barnes briefed Queen Camilla on the investigation results in the study where the secret passage had been discovered. The passage was now being sealed permanently to prevent any future security breaches. Thomas Hartwell and Marcus Dunn will both face serious criminal charges, Detective Barnes reported. "We've also discovered that Marcus has been involved in several other high-profile kidnappings across Europe." "What about palace security?" the Queen asked. "How do we make sure this never happens again?" James had already been working on comprehensive security improvements. "We're conducting background checks on every staff member and installing new monitoring systems throughout the building. We're also mapping all the old passages and secret rooms to make sure there are no more surprises." The investigation had revealed several other hidden passages in the palace that had been forgotten over the centuries. All of them were being documented and secured to prevent future infiltration. Thomas Hartwell's betrayal had shocked everyone who worked with him. He had been considered a reliable and trustworthy employee for 12 years. But his gambling addiction had made him vulnerable to manipulation. "He genuinely regrets what he did," Detective Barnes told the Queen. "But that doesn't excuse his actions. He put Charlotte's life in danger and betrayed the trust you placed in him." The fake Dr. Webb's true identity led to the discovery of an international criminal network that had been operating across Europe for several years. His arrest resulted in solving multiple unsolved kidnapping cases in France, Germany, and Italy. Over the following weeks, Charlotte slowly recovered from her ordeal with the help of professional counselors and the support of her family. She had been kept blindfolded for most of her captivity, which had actually protected her from seeing details that might have made her trauma worse. The secret passages that had been used in the kidnapping became a symbol of how even the most secure places could be vulnerable to inside threats. The palace's security was completely overhauled, with new technology and procedures that would prevent similar breaches in the future. Thomas Hartwell was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his role in the kidnapping. During his trial, he expressed deep remorse for his actions and asked for Charlotte's forgiveness, though she was not required to respond. Marcus Dunn received a much longer sentence and was also wanted by police forces across Europe for his other crimes. His arrest had effectively shut down an entire criminal organization that had terrorized wealthy families for years. The story of Charlotte's kidnapping and rescue became a reminder that even royal families were not immune to crime, but it also showed how quickly and effectively law enforcement could respond when everyone worked together. Queen Camilla kept the key to the sealed passage in her personal safe, along with a letter from Charlotte, thanking everyone who had risked their safety to bring her home. The letter served as a reminder of how precious security and trust were, and how easily they could be lost if people weren't vigilant. The royal guards, who had conducted the original search through Camilla's private chambers, were commended for their thoroughness and dedication. Their discovery of the secret passage had been the crucial breakthrough that led to Charlotte's rescue. Princess Charlotte eventually returned to school and continued her normal life, though she never forgot the kindness of the people who had worked so hard to bring her home safely. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about trust, security, and the importance of having people who would never give up on finding her. The palace returned to its normal routine, but with much stronger security measures and a renewed appreciation for the dedicated people who worked tirelessly to protect the royal family every single day.